Hey everyone, thank you for having me. So yeah, I'm Davies. I'm the founder of AgUnity, and where do we point it? We'll work this out in a minute. There we go. So AgUnity, we've been around 7 years. We started by making very purpose-built smartphones for the very lowest income farmers in the world, and we work in a dozen countries around the world, in places like Ethiopia, Papua New Guinea, and we've evolved that vision over time, particularly in the last year as we've started to work with some much bigger organisations. What we're focusing on now is improving the supply chains for the very lowest income farmers in the world. And I'm going to tell you why that is so important. Because the current system for these very low farmers is incredibly broken. Like I say, we work in a dozen countries, so we see the same problem time and time again. In the places where there is the most food shortage and the lowest incomes, there's mountains of food that just go to waste because the farmers can't sell it, can't get it to someone that will buy it. They're often getting a fraction of the price that they should be for very valuable commodities, like things like coffee and cocoa, just because things are broken in their supply chain. So what AgUnity is trying to do is, by various mechanisms, trying to fix that problem. Why are smallholder farmers important? If you look at all these SDGs, you can link them almost all back to this one thing. There's 500 million smallholder farmers in the world, but they support an ecosystem of 3 billion people between their families and the people in their villages. They are most of the people living in poverty. If you increase their income, you've made the biggest dent on poverty. But you've also put more food into the world, so we're starting to address the second problem. When farmers have got more income, they also act more sustainably. Like, we do this all the time. You see, once a farmer's got a little bit of extra income, they start educating their kids. They start doing things more responsibly and sustainably. So if you want to go after all these UN SDGs, this is the #1 place to start. These farmers also produce 1/3 of the world food, and like I said, enormous amounts of that goes to waste. You have situations in Ethiopia where we've got villages of farmers who can't sell produce, and you've got people literally starving like a few kilometres away from it, just because things are broken and not organised in those communities. And there's kind of an inconvenient truth, like, we all are complicit in this problem. I'm pretty sure every one of us eats one of these things, between coffee, cocoa, tea, vanilla, rice products, spices. They are all produced by the very lowest pouring people in the world, and they are earning a fraction of what you pay for those produce. Unless you go out and buy everything from Fairtrade, we work with Fairtrade and a few other sustainable brands extensively. Unless it's Fairtrade, most of the other brands are not really doing a whole lot. Fairtrade make a good effort, but they also set the bar pretty high. So probably 80–90% of the farmers could never aspire to be part of a Fairtrade cooperative. So they do really well, but they're not really helping the majority of them. So it is time to change this. And what the most interesting thing is it is incredibly easy to change this problem. We've worked in communities where we've delivered phones across the village, we've helped them set up with systems, and in one season, we've seen the average income of that village go up by 3 times. How would anyone here feel about tripling their income? Like, it'd be great for us, but when you're living in abject poverty, it's life-changing. And it doesn't help the farmers only, because what happens when the farmer earns more? They spend it in the shop, they buy fish from the fishermen. It circles around the village many times. I'd love to get a university to come and study this. Oxford University was talking about it before COVID. That the recycling of that money in smaller communities is amazing. So you spur that community and you spur everyone else. So what we're trying to do is break the cycle of poverty. We're trying to take these farmers to just be a little bit more productive. And like I say, it's not particularly difficult to do. Their main problems are when they've got commodities, like a farmer produces coffee, they're often selling them to some sort of a middleman who's selling to someone else, and they're losing a lot of the value on the way. Because they're working in often cash-based societies, and this is a particular problem for women. And I'll explain why in a minute. Because they're working in cash-based societies, they're often getting, the person who's buying the commodity off them, they have to cart big bags of cash around. We've replaced a system in Papua New Guinea where they used to go with bags of cash through the village, and they actually had a 50 caliber machine gun on the truck to protect that. So they were going out with armed service just because it's a cash economy. This is the problem with buying commodities out of these lakes. As soon as you turn the farmers to being digital, they can hand over their crops, they can get a record on their phone that can't be altered, and they can get a transfer of money into a bank account. Or they can come and collect something from the cooperative. You take that risk out. Now, like I said, that's incredibly important for women farmers who represent the majority of micro farmers. It's about 60% of small farmers are women. They often, and I've heard this many times, it's particularly tragic when you hear it in places like Papua New Guinea, they're afraid to actually bring cash back to the village because the men will turn up and want to have a party and it's all gone the same night. So the fact that they can take their coffee beans into the village, they can get a record of it and not have to deal with that cash is incredibly empowering, because not only are women the majority of farmers, but also, as we've seen, they'll usually make the most responsible decisions to what to do with that money. I've broken the clicker here. Right, there we go. So simple thing is take them off cash economy, give them a way of recording what they're doing, and then the next step is to just start to reorganise the supply chain so that the organisations, the cooperatives and the buyers can interact with the farmers, can pay them in better ways than just giving them cash, because often the farmers don't really want the cash. They want to get supplies, they want to get solar kits, they want to get inputs for the farmers. And it's all those things that we organise. Like I say, AgUnity's been doing this around 7 years, so we've learnt a lot in that time. And we work actually about a dozen countries of these, but because we work with fair trade, we're in 40-something countries. Our product's used all over the world, and we've got thousands of farmers with phones. Just like this one, when we first started, not many people in developing nations had smartphones. We were a bit groundbreaking to do that. And we took a normal smartphone and we replaced the Android operating system with a super app that comes up, takes over the phone. So the farmer doesn't have to deal with things. We can push updates to them. It's secure and locked to their identity. So lots of interesting tech. But then we started working with a really big cooperative. This is the Oromi Farmers Cooperative Union, which has 560,000 farmers in Ethiopia. So this was life-changing. This was change of vision to us, because AgUnity previously working with groups of a couple of hundred or 1,000 farmers and getting great results. But you can't change the world for a couple of thousand farmers at a time. So working with Oromi and another group in Ghana and another group in Kenya, we're starting to get into the hundreds of thousands of farmers. And what we realised by interacting with Oromi Coffee Union is you have to help up the supply chain as well. Oromi has 560,000 members. They don't have a digital list of all those farmers. It's on paper records. They can't make digital payments to those farmers. A very interesting thing we discovered was all those farmers, you'd only have to pay them about $1 a month or so, and they'd plant and regenerate their farms. You can imagine how much impact carbon you could sequester with 500,000 farmers for fractions of cents on the dollar compared to any other initiative. But there's no coordination in the cooperative or the organisation level, and that's pretty much the standard problem all around the world. So AgUnity has been working with this cooperative and quite a few others around the world. And what we've done is we've enhanced what we were doing. We used to just do this super app that was focused all on the farmers. We've now brought in the hub, which is a solution for the cooperatives. It helps them organise, helps them pay digitally, know who their farmers are, deal with things like their organic certifications and their fair trade so they can sell more produce. Because if we don't help the cooperatives to sell the produce, often it doesn't matter so much if we're helping the farmers. And then finally in Ghana, we brought in this crops list, and that started actually in Kenya dealing with indigenous vegetables. We had a really great project there where we're helping the kind of the original Kenyan indigenous vegetables that as Kenya had become urbanised, they weren't making their way into the city. People were growing them, couldn't sell them. People in the city wanted them because that's what my grandmother used to cook, and I need that. And the whole supply chain was broken. And Virginia Tech and us and you at SAID worked on a great project where we helped digitise that supply chain, and we saw the farmers roughly double their income. And forgot to mention, the other thing you're seeing is people in Nairobi are now, instead of eating packets of biscuits, they're eating the original vegetables they used to, which is so much more healthy. So yeah, the hub is all about organising the farmers and the cooperatives. This is how they manage their groups of farmers and connect to them, how they pay them as well. Then the super app, which is phone-based application, changing a phone. So it does all the things a farmer need. They don't have to deal with the app store. They don't have to have a credit card, all the things that we take for granted that work for us. The app just lets them manage their stuff, lets them become cashless, lets them have records that they can understand. And as you can see, it's all geometric shapes and primary colours, so they don't need to read. We translate it in different languages. And they communicate with each other with QR codes. So the phones actually, mostly, they don't actually have them online. They're used more like a mobile device rather than an actual phone. And then finally, this crops list is really interesting. This is creating a marketplace so that farmers in the community can say, hey, I've got these vegetables, I've got some black rice, who's going to buy it off me? Simple problem, like we take this for granted, like a farmer in Australia's got something and, Costas or someone picks it up and takes it to Woolworths, all that's fixed in developing countries. You'd be amazed how these things just don't exist in places like Ethiopia, Nigeria, Ghana that have got tens or hundreds of millions of people where things just not working very well. And then finally, we did this 5 years ago. We created a company that I think filled a very important part of the ecosystem, and that's track and trace. Because there's lots of regulations coming on in European where the coffee companies and cocoa companies need to be able to say the origin of their produce, was there any child labour involved, what's going on in the forest. But also from the other end, consumers want to know, is the farmer getting paid fairly? So we started a company in Australia called Escavox. That company did really well, raised a lot of funding, got a great contract with Woolworths, and then unfortunately they got a great contract with Woolworths. So they became very profitable and did a really good job for Woolworths, but unfortunately Woolworths doesn't have anyone's best interests at heart. So we sold our shares, and we've now started another company that's doing that, hopefully in a better way, focusing on Aromia Coffee Union and some of the biggest coffee suppliers in the world, so that the coffee buyers can say, farmers are getting paid fairly, this is what's going on in my supply chain. And this organisation we're very lucky. We recruited one of the former founders of Market, which is a big market data company. They got acquired for 64 billion or something recently, and he left, and so he'll be running that company. So it's going to be like a Bloomberg or Reuters for the food industry, which we think is the very interesting opportunity. Cool. So yeah, around the world, we work with the who's who of NGOs, everyone from World Food Programme to USAID to CDF, Fairtrade, etc. And yeah, we should mention that most of this comes down to this lady here. Navitra works in our field operations. One of the things we learnt really well during COVID, before COVID, we used to send Navitra and her team out to Ethiopia, and they'd work with the farmers and they'd sit down. And Navit comes from an NGO background. So she put things on a big A4 or A1 sheet, and she'd get farmers all sitting around and they'd show them how things move and stuff like that. It makes it very relatable. So she's created a program where we don't come and tell farmers what they should do. We don't say, here's this solution. We sit down with the farmers and say, what's your problem? What do you want to do? Now, 90% of the time, what we do fixes their problem right away. But because they tell us, and then we tell them what the solution is, they're already bought into what we're doing. And that's all come from Navitra's fantastic work. Cool. So, it's AgUnity. We're a for-profit company. We do raise funding as well. And there's just a couple of other interesting things we're doing. How many minutes have I got, Mick? 3 minutes, perfect. All right, so just before COVID, probably bad timing, we did something that we thought was quite interesting. We created Aggregate Foundation and a digital token. And that was designed to allow, say, you to go in a coffee shop in Australia, buy your coffee, see the farmer that grew your coffee and send them a small tip, which is huge money if the farmer's in Ethiopia. So wonderful idea, that foundation's gone well. In the process of doing that, we learnt some very interesting things about financial regulations and digital tokens and things like that. And that put us on a very interesting path. So we're now creating something that we call a code. And it's quite hard to explain. A code is a new type of organisation. It incorporates AI, it incorporates blockchain. It's nothing like you've ever seen before. And the reason we're doing this is because, look, we're out in the field, we're working very hard to help these farmers, but that progress is way too slow. We need to see things move faster. If you look at the type of organisations that exist today between companies, governments, religious organisations and charities, they're not actually as effective as this as you think they should be. And we think we've kind of stumbled on a pattern that might help this, accelerate this significantly. We call it a code, as in a code of fairness, code of freedom, like a code of ethics. And so this is just about to be released. And I'm looking now for a working group to sort of brainstorm around this project. I think if anyone wants to participate in that, please contact me after. We'll be taking a list. I'm looking for people that can critique it, because we don't want to put something out in the market and have a whole lot of people think it. We want to find the faults in it first. So if anyone's interested in that, please come and see me after. We'll do a working group somewhere here on the Gold Coast where I explain what it is, because it is a little bit difficult to unpack. If anyone's familiar with the black swan, it's a black swan model. It's something that hasn't existed before. Might not work, but we think it can accelerate development around these areas. And I think it'll be, when you see what it potentially could do, I think most people will be as amazed as the people we've introduced it to so far. I believe it's truly groundbreaking and eclipses what we've done so far. There you go, Mick. I think I'm right on time.